You're listening to the Fusion Patrol podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And tonight we're going to be looking at a new, old British science fiction series, Doomwatch. And what can I say about Doomwatch? This is a 1970s Kit Peddler and Jerry Davis show. You may recognize those names. They're the creators of the Cybermen on Doctor Who. And to say that they may have a slightly bleak outlook on technology and progress is putting it mildly.
Well, I think they have a rather disturbing outlook on it on several different levels.
This was a BBC series that ran about 38 episodes originally in 1970 through 1972. And it, unfortunately, like many of the old Doctor Who stories, many of them don't exist. In fact, I don't know what the exact number is, but I'd think less than half of that 38 still exist.
That's tragic.
It is, because Doomwatch is... Well, I like the show.
I did too.
It's a very different show. I mean, it does have a very bleak outlook. The basic premise, and the first episode does still exist, which is called The Plastic Eaters, is really Doomwatch in a nutshell. Everything you need to know about Doomwatch pops up in this episode. They've really set the stage for everything that goes forward. Before we start talking about the pilot episode, though, let's just set up the premise for you. Doomwatch it's sort of a double name. It's technically the Department of Observation and Measurement of Scientific Work, which, if you work out the acronym there, does not work out to Doomwatch, but it's sort of Doomswatch sort of thing. But they have a computer, which they call Doomwatch, and the department's called Doomwatch because that's kind of what they do. They are a department within the ministry, and it's never really clear which ministry it is, but they're a department within the ministry that's job is to oversee technological progress isn't quite the right word, but it's meant to make sure that really nasty things don't happen with the various scientific projects that are undertaken within Britain. The project is run up by Nobel laureate Dr. Quist, who is one of the mathematicians who worked on the H-bomb. And we're led to believe that the reason he does Doomwatch is because he feels guilty about what he did to help build the H-bomb.
And that way he has those photos hanging on his wall.
That's right. He has the big pictures of the photos on his wall.
Remind himself about all the death that he's caused in his past.
What have we wrought? Yes. And that's, based a little bit on, I think, Oppenheimer, who really regretted what he did after he did it.
Yeah, Edward Teller, much the same. He regretted his role too. So, yeah, it's definitely Quist is taken from some true historical figures.
There are 3 or 4 other people in the Doomwatch organization. There's John Ridge.
John Lodge. Yes, Led Zeppelin.
Is it Ridge or is it? It's Ridge. It's
John Ridge. John Lodge is Led Zeppelin.
Okay, I thought that was Eddie Van Halen.
No, I take it back. John Lodge, Moody Blues.
Moody Blues. There we go. That sounds
bass
more
player,
like it.
I think. Yeah.
He's one of those Moody guys in the band. Yes. So Ridge is an ex-MI5, MI6 operative, basically a spy who works for them. There's the new guy, Chris, I believe, Wren. Christopher Wren was an architect of Tobias Wren. Yes, Christopher Wren was a famous person. Tobias Wren, he is a chemist and the newest member of Doomwatch, through which we get our introduction to the show in the pilot. There's Bradley, the computer expert, and then there's Miss Honey
Penny.
it's a terrible name. It's Honey Biscuit, Honey Pot.
I didn't get her name.
Honeycutt. No, it's not Honeycutt, but anyhow, she's basically the she's the crumpet. I think that's probably the safest way to put it. She's the secretary.
She's the secretary that everybody hits on.
Or at least Ridge does.
Well, yeah, Ridge loves to hit on.
Well, Ridge hits on everything, but we can talk about that later. The pilot episode opens with an ordinary commuter flight flying back to, I think it's flying into San Pedro, I believe is the country they call it.
Yes.
And as they come in, there's some problems with the equipment and the gauges. And the plane quite literally starts melting in their hands. First it's the insulation on the wire causing shorts, and then it's what else do we see? I mean, the yoke
yes
goes.
Well, exactly.
The pilot's trying to pull back on the yoke. I think the gauges start to fail on him. It's particularly nasty, and then that's followed up thereby with the crash and killing of 35 passengers.
It's a crash that's just it's ridiculous.
It's a terrible crash.
It's very over the top.
Not only is it a terrible crash, but it must be taken from like 50 other. Now this is a fault of the production company. It's stock footage from lots of different things. There's some of an atomic blast in there as one of the little bits you see, and I think
you see a bunch of crash test dummies that are in there that are moving about because of the crash.
You see, I think, a bit of a building, some brick building imploding, even though it lands in the woods. It's it's just they've got some stuff of exploding, and they use that to splice it together rather than wrecking a plane themselves, which just shows you how cheap the budget is.
It was BBC 1970.
Yeah.
They're notorious for being cheap.
It does come off very cheap anyway, but the plane crashes, and it's very effective as the people are.
Yeah, from a story point, I thought it was very effective, especially since I'm terrified of flying.
Well, I have to go on a flight next week, so I'll try not to take any Variant 14 with me on the plane. So, first day on the job, Tobias Wren shows up at Doomwatch, which is now interested in this air crash, and he's shipped off to San Pedro, barely a word that he can get even edgewise. He doesn't even really get a chance to talk to the boss. He just says, okay, go fly off to San Pedro.
He goes in to see, he tries to see Quist, and then finally just pretty much gives up, and right as he's about to leave, Quist looks up, where are you going? Pack your bags. You're heading to San Pedro. You're going to investigate this plane crash.
Yeah.
And which immediately sets up what kind of a character Quist really is.
Yes.
He's very no nonsense. He's not a people person.
No, he's not. And he's very dedicated to what he's doing. While he's off in San Pedro, we get the setup for the series, really. Quist contacts the ministry. Well, Quist has Ridge contact the ministry, and then ultimately he contacts the ministry. And, oh, no, we're not working on anything that could possibly do anything like that. And Quist is, well, if we had full access to everything, then we'd know. Oh, you've got full access to everything. Well, we don't have access to this one place. Well, you don't need that. So they set up the whole notion that the minister really doesn't want Quist doing his job.
Well, I think what we were saying here was the actual quote about Doomwatch, why they were set up, is that they were appointed to investigate any scientific research, public or private, that could be possibly harmful to the human race by the government. Yet, as you just pointed out, that same government is stonewalling them. So you kind of have to wonder, is this a little science fiction here with a political subtext going on?
Oh, there's more than a little political subtext going on in this one. This series is loaded with the constant
Which
battle.
I suspected.
Yeah. Between the minutes. I think we go through a few ministers as the series goes on because heads,
it's like The Prisoner, a new number 2 every week.
Not quite that bad, but heads do roll from time to time because of the ministers' culpability. No, I wouldn't say ineptness, culpability. That they are indeed engaged in projects that they shouldn't be engaged in, and
inept in letting things get out.
In this particular episode, yes, there was a that's an interesting question. We'll talk about that. So, what does any self-respecting government agency do when they feel they're being stonewalled by their superiors?
Go behind the government's back.
That's right. They send in their secret agent, John Ridge, to break in first to the ministry, and then when he gets some dirt on him there, to the top secret bioweapons research facility. And at first, Quist doesn't want to do it because Ridge suggests the idea. Well, I'll go in and get the information. And after, some thought, he goes, yeah, all right, do it. Then when they realize they're going to have to go to the top secret defense organization.
Beeston.
Yeah, Beeston. Ridge is not so hot on the idea because it's a bioweapons plant, and that's not the kind of place you want to break into. And at this point now, Quist is totally committed to this line of reasoning. He's like, get on with it. He doesn't want to hear the argument. He just sends him off to do it. Let's talk a little bit about Ridge. He
can be very charming.
He's an odd character, I have to say. His introduction when Ren comes into him is the secretary doesn't introduce him. Doesn't introduce Ridge to Ren. And so Ridge says, well, I'm John Ridge. And she would have introduced me, but she's upset at me because I pinched her bum before lunch.
He's a bit of a sexist pig, I guess.
Oh, he is such a sexist pig. I think they're going for not quite James Bond, because I don't think they've gone with this sort of urbane character. They've gone almost like the prototype for Austin Powers here.
Ooh.
He's groovy. He's got kind of.
Yeah, he was kind of dressed hip. I think he was sporting an ascot, if I remember right.
I think he was. Yes, I think he was, and of course he's got the big hair.
The only thing we need to do, I make you horny, baby? Do I? Like, that would have been it.
I could actually picture him saying that. Maybe not in that voice, but he is quite the charmer and quite the sexist.
Quite the narcissist.
That too. I think they've really gone for that spy trope from that.
Very, very, very egotistical, very sure of himself as a ladies' man.
He breaks into the facility and steals quite easily. Yes. And bluffs his way right into the top security lab and gets a sample of variant 14. Variant 14. Which turns out to be a formula for disposing of waste plastic.
Right.
Which is a very real environmental problem. So there's kind of I don't want to say altruistic, but in other words, the program is recognizing that the government recognizes that plastic waste is going to be a problem.
Right.
And that they're interested in solving that problem. The problem is that they aren't careful enough about doing that. And I think that comes back time and time again. It's not necessarily that the things that they're trying to do are bad. It's that they're not cautious enough. or that they don't look at the impact. And that's what Doomwatch is there to do, is to keep that watchdog and make sure that it doesn't get out of hand and that it doesn't destroy the world. Therefore, I don't know that the H-bomb is really an actually good parallel for it, because that's very different circumstances. But nonetheless, now the minister's mad because Ridge gets caught. I mean, I don't think he ever expected to get in and out uncaught. I think it's just that he got in and he got the sample.
That's all that's important.
And now that he gets caught, now they kick him out, which is good, because if we're in the United States, they'd have shot him or put him in a bunker or something, and he'd never gotten out. In Britain, they just kick people out who've walked into a
very easily accessible top secret
military base. Oh, they did claim to be the press without giving any credentials, so that could be. Oh, we don't want to get the press on the wrong side.
I thought that kind of stretched credibility just a little too thin for me, but
Quist and Doomwatch, the computer, do an analysis and find out that this stuff is very, very bad. That it eats everything plastic. I think he says it could go through London in 12 hours at one point.
Sounds about right.
I think it was right. If it were loose and it started spreading, it could spread, your plastic purse, you get on the subway, you touch these people, they have plastic, it goes on.
It acts like a contagion.
It is a bioweapon. There's a bioagent, I should say. And unfortunately, Tobias Wren has brought some of the plane wreck back with him on the plane, which begins to dissolve.
Oh, yes. Hilarity ensues.
I thought the plane dissolving was it was very interesting. I liked it. At times, it was a little...
It bordered on slapstick, I thought, for me. I mean, to see all this passengers in the cabin, and all to see just this, what looks like this very thin kind of tar just pouring on them.
Yes.
It felt, all you needed to do is just add a laugh track. And it would have served as a comedy.
I thought that for example, some people will reach down and pick up their plastic lighter and it's kind of dissolved into a gooey slop. All right. In other cases, somebody's purse has dissolved and is kind of dripping along or bags run or plastic doors start melting. And in other cases, as you say, it looks like tar or probably chocolate syrup.
Yeah.
Just pouring out of crevices on the plane. And I don't know about you, but if I were on a plane and the overhead vent suddenly just liquefied,
I'd be panicked.
It fell down on its wires, but then this goo is coming on, or black stuff is seeping around the window that looks like chocolate syrup. I'm amused at how many people stuck their hands in it. And they're like, ew! That is the last thing I do, is touch it.
Well, since you brought that part up, I'm going to back up a little bit. You made mention about what Tobias Wren had done. I mean, we know, he was sent to investigate this plane crash because of his credentials.
Mm-hmm. As a chemist. He's a chemist.
As a chemist. This is what really bothered me. He so nonchalantly takes this piece out of the plane wreckage on the plane without any kind of protection. I would have expected, granted, yes, I know what happened. I'm already familiar now with the variant 14. But even if I hadn't been, I'd like to think that if I were in his position, taking something out that was left from a very mysterious plane crash with...
Unfortunately, they don't actually know what happened on the plane because the plane never really got to do anything but put out a mayday.
No,
and it
never did.
burned up. So
It was still a very mysterious plane crash, and obviously something of a chemical nature had to have occurred. I mean, otherwise, what would they have sent Ren? They know something, they just don't know all of it.
there's some mention during the course of the story that
There
at
was
least
I think that
that they think it burns itself out. That
well, I think they also there were reports that came in from the tower in San Pedro about the parts of the plane turning into liquefying.
could be.
And I seem to I thought I heard that, and if that is indeed the case, if that did happen,
It's not like Ren had a brief, though. I mean, go get on the plane. I'm not a plane crash investigator. Well, have a go.
true, I don't know, it just still struck me as odd for him to so blindly just take this piece out. I mean, okay, yeah, he doesn't know that it's covered with a bioagent, but at the same
They could be thinking that the plane passed through a cloud of some material, or they could be thinking that there's some chemical reaction or some solvent. I don't know that you jump to the conclusion that there's some sort of virulent
no, but wouldn't you think that there's a remnant
contagion.
that is still there, which could cause a problem
Well,
if left unchecked?
If you didn't think it was alive and growing, then the likelihood of damage is probably not very great. And it's not like if you touch something, he kept it in the bag, more or less, the plastic bag. Yeah. It's not going to, it wouldn't, under normal circumstances, if it were a chemical agent, it's not going to come in contact with anything outside the bag. It's only when you take into account that it's actually growing and spreading like a virus. So, he's a chemist, not a biochemist. So I don't know. And it seems, in this day and age, it seems unlikely that we would allow them to take that out on the plane and work with it.
I think I've seen too many episodes of X-Files and Fringe for me to come to this conclusion.
So, but back in those days, they were all smoking on the plane.
That's true. Oh yeah, that was a weird sight to see.
We're back on that. Anyhow, fortunately, through clever containment and we're going to say Mr. Wren does make it through the episode. But not before Quist has to have a showdown with the minister. Because they have to find the vector. How
did this get out?
How did this get out of that lab? Because the scientist in charge of the lab says his quarantine procedures are, I forgot what the word he used for, but absolute or something. And here's another frequent theme of Doomwatch. The scientists working on most of the projects are pretty self-sure of themselves.
More narcissists on a scientific level.
I suppose this guy is running an institute and in fact he's positive that his quarantine procedures are valid and that what he's doing is safe and that the precautions he's taken are good. Quist shows him some new data that they collected using the Doomwatch computer, which is apparently a really impressive computer. And rather than deny the results, and to his credit, the head scientist, takes it in stride and says, well, if that's, then we need to, that we need to take this into account. But once again, my quarantine procedures were not at fault. And he's kind of right. But again, this guy just does not have the same moral outlook that Quist does. Quist is basically, everybody that does science is going to do something bad. He looks at it that way, which is a terrible outlook.
Yeah, it's a bit grim.
It's a bit grim. He's obviously a damaged man, racked with guilt. But then the other end of the extreme is often played out in Doomwatch, that he's correct, that everyone else is careless. Initially, what we find out is that the minister's secretary's cousin was a stewardess on the flight, and that we track the contagion down to the secretary and her pen, which is plastic, which was kind of it was hard to tell that the pen had melted, but it obviously was experiencing something. But then she never went in the facility. So how could it be? It turns out the minister went in the facility, and the minister had a tape recorder, which he wasn't supposed to take in. He snuck it in so he could take notes while he was in the facility, because it had a plastic tape in it. Now, a couple things there. We saw how Ridge got the variant 14 out. He just carried it out in his pocket. They didn't even search him.
Right.
Which tells me that their quarantine
is
not that good.
Non-existent.
The minister obviously brought this thing in and then took it back out and got contaminated. But if he had to smuggle it in, he surely couldn't have used it because it's a tape recorder. And I'd have to pull it out. It's like, okay, make some notes for my secretary, because then somebody would have seen it.
Mm.
So he apparently smuggled in and never used it. We don't know that, but...
Well, he hands... It's implied that he uses it because...
Yes, because there's a tape.
Because there's a tape, and he gives it to the secretary so that she can transcribe it.
That's right.
And she puts it in her purse where it comes in contact with the pen.
And then the plane, and ultimately kills the people in the thing. What surprised... Okay, so there's your chain of reaction. It's the minister's fault. The minister was going to shut Quist down once and for all, but not after this. They quarantine an airfield. They land the plane just barely by the seat of their pants. And more really bad stock footage, because the plane lands and it's rough, but it's just an ordinary landing, and then suddenly there's flames everywhere outside.
I'm a little curious about that. They seem to, and I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. I wish I had, but I seem to remember there was a bit where they did actually lower the landing gear.
They did. Oh yeah, they landed. They landed normally.
Yeah, but that was a belly landing, according to that stock footage.
Yeah. Well, and there was no fire. So, and yet there was flames aplenty. It's poor stock footage is what it was.
It was completely illogical.
It was very poor stock footage there. I guess they don't have that many air disasters on film that they could fall back onto.
Hmm.
So everyone makes it alive and a day. Now, if Quist is correct earlier in the episode about when he talks to Miss Honeybuns, whatever her name is, it's not on the Wikipedia page. I'd look if I could find it.
I actually don't remember her name.
I don't think they actually call her by name.
I think they do. I don't remember hearing it at all.
She's in the end credits.
Have you tried IMDb? I know you hate them, but
I don't hate IMDb.
You just have contempt.
I
mistrust.
I have mistrust. Honeyset. That's it. Pat Honeyset.
That's a terrible name.
Like Quist, Wren, and Ridge are the greatest of it. Quist is a weird one.
Honeyset, there's a certain kind of strange insinuation going on there. And she was a well-figured woman.
So overall, I know you've only seen the one episode, right?
Right.
Of the show. And I have watched all the remaining episodes that exist a few years ago. What do you think of the show overall?
I rather enjoy it. It makes the attempt at trying to be, this is going to sound a little strange, but a hard scientific show. Makes the attempt. Maybe not necessarily always succeeding based on some of the things that we've seen, but it was a worthwhile attempt. I am a little concerned with the notion that all scientific advancement is bad. I don't necessarily like that, but I still find it I found it rather engaging. I think what I was really keyed in most of all was the political intrigue,
Mm.
if you want to call it that. I mean, obviously, the minister's hiding something because he clearly wants Quist and company to play ball, so to speak.
I think he
And
even dictates a memo to that effect at
he
one
pretty
point.
much does.
Yeah.
He wants to get Quist in line, Quist and his entire people in line, and then at one point even makes a threat that he's going to shut Doomwatch down. So we're given this idea that there's that Doomwatch, which, as I said, which has been said in the show, has been set up by the government, is still at odds with this same government, and I love the idea of these two entities constantly trying to outfox each other. Doomwatch trying to put a stop to whatever scientific mess is about to take place, versus the government that's out to make make their scientific advancements no matter what the cost. And to see these two entities try and outwit each other, I would find that for television, that could be some entertaining intrigue.
And they do make a point in the story to mention that there was a big deal of press and airplay concerning Quist, a Nobel laureate, taking control when they set this organization up. And it's explicitly stated that, one, we'd like to get rid of Quist, but that would raise quite a stink. He really will have to be closed down for something ironclad, because otherwise the people are just not going to accept that they want to get rid of him. And conversely, Quist points out that if they get him off of his role, they'll just replace him with some sort of a ball playing pencil pusher,
Right.
and Doomwatch will be useless and will cease its useful function. So Doomwatch is Quist in a way.
Pretty much.
What? So talk a little bit about this sort of Luddite, for want of a better word, attitude towards science. I mean, this is something that I think we've discussed before, and probably every opportunity I get. I enjoy the show. Don't get me wrong. I like the program. I would recommend the program. It definitely has some legs to it, at least for a while. But at the same time, I do think that it has a overly negative view of scientific progress. And I don't like that. I never liked that.
I don't like it either. I find it to be a little bit reactionary, especially. I mean, I don't know what the social climate was at that time. I mean, I can look at what's going on in the United States today with certain more conservative, dare I say, religious factions of society that want to squash science. Science is evil. Science is trying to disprove our beliefs in the Almighty. Whatever you want to, however you want to take that. So whenever I hear any kind of talk of science is bad, I immediately flinch. So I'm kind of curious what was going on then.
I can tell you. Well, I'll take a stab at it. I think there was probably some more anti-nuclear sentiment, and I think in many ways Doomwatch is
A reaction to that?
a reaction to anti-nuclear sentiment. There are other things that could be going on there, but I mean that was really the big one. And
well, with a name like Doomwatch, I mean, the first time I even heard of Doomwatch, and I just saw the opening credits.
Oh, those great big bombastic.
Oh, yeah, we should talk about
that. Boom, boom.
Constant nuclear explosion and death.
And the words Doom.
Like the word Doomwatch, just flashing on the screen, alternating. I mean, it kind of, I think it sets a tone.
It's very downbeat. There's no doubt about that. It's not that I'm trying to portray science as roses, and because science itself is a neutral thing. Scientists are people, and you fall under all kinds of different people and different attitudes and different points. And of course, good people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things is what makes drama. And so you have to have a villain, and in Doomwatch it's been characterized as the scientists and their soulless pursuit of progress, if you will. It's all Mary Shelley's fault. It's been Mary Shelley's fault since the very, very beginning. She has a lot to answer for.
Mm-hmm.
That darn Frankenstein novel started it all, and we're still living with it. We're still paying for it. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly what this is. It's Frankenstein.
Science is, any kind of scientific creation is the monster, basically.
Anyhow, Jerry Davis.
Yeah, I don't care for that kind of thought. Granted, you've seen more of it than I have.
As a cautionary tale, I mean, that's the thing. Science fiction is a medium by which you can explore possibilities and eventualities, and that you can tell a story that is not going to happen, but that can give you a framework in which you can tell something. And so in that respect, I give Doomwatch a pass, because that's what it is. This is worst case scenario show. And to do worst case scenario, you have to show it going horribly wrong.
Right.
I actually think that, I don't know if you've seen this, but they're making a new Planet of the Apes movie.
Yeah, Rise of the Planet
of the Apes. And the first trailers are out, and
I haven't seen any of them yet.
Basically, the premise is that genetic scientists, are working on a cure for brain injuries.
And what, they're testing on apes?
Yep. And it turns out it doesn't cure brain injuries, but it increases
smarter
intelligence. And then they stage a revolt.
That's Frankenstein.
That's an episode of Doomwatch.
Is it?
Yes. Jerry Davis, Kit Peddler, the creators frequently concentrated on scientific themes, like the Cybermen. That was, their technology dehumanizes you, replaces what makes us human. They
really are down on science, aren't they?
That really was what they were about, at least in terms of writing. Jerry Davis was, as far as I can tell, was a writer. Kit Peddler, however, was an actual scientist. He's head of the electron microscopy department at Institute of Ophthalmology, University of London, and he was, I guess, hired as a scientific advisor. And then for Doctor Who, and then he got together with Jerry Davis, and the two of them It worked as a writing team for many years because of that. So one did the science, one did the making it into an interesting story kind of approach.
The literary
Yeah.
end of things.
But if you look at people who've written for Doomwatch, Terrence Dudley, Lewis Marks, Dennis Spooner, Brian Halls, these are all Doctor Who writers from that period of time. So, there's a lot of crossover between this and Doctor Who. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. But we'll be talking about that.
The one other thing that makes Doomwatch interesting are the people. They're interesting. I'm not saying these aren't a bunch of very noble people in Doomwatch. They are very flawed, and as you pointed out, Quist is a very damaged man. So to see how these personalities play out, I think, also makes that's for me. That's part of what made Doomwatch as enjoyable as it was, because these are engaging characters. They may not be the best shining example of humanity, but they're still interesting to watch.
And they do care. They do care what happens.
Yeah, even though either their motivations or their actions might be questionable, at their heart they do care about what does happen.
Well, I think unless we have anything else on Doomwatch, I think we've just about covered it twice from one end to the other. There wasn't any other examples of bum pinching in this episode, so perhaps later on.
No, I would just simply add this little bit, and something that I'd written. Although I thought it had a cheap 1970 BBC feel to it, and I'm sure people are going to complain on that. What I liked about it is that it is a show about science and the responsibility that people must take when working with science. And that's a rather neutral statement. I'm not going to take Quist's point of view and say that all science is bad. But I will say that what I got out of this is you must be responsible for what you do. And I would be very interested in seeing the rest of the series, or as much as is available. As long as it doesn't involve a plane crash.
I think we've had all the plane crashes.
Oh, thank you.
We've had all the plane crashes. Unfortunately, there is an atomic bomb blast, but that episode's missing.
Actually, that's the one that I really would have liked to have seen.
Yeah. But perhaps we'll fill in the gaps when we get around to that one. Couple of pieces of administrative stuff. As we said, we had a contest running for giving away that lovely Doctor Who book, and I can say that we had over 100 and I believe 30 people come to the website, go to the thread and read the thread where you needed to post to enter into the contest. And there's not one single entry by somebody who isn't a podcaster on this podcast.
I find that very peculiar.
I do find that very particular, and that worries me a lot. And so what I'm asking is, you 100-some people who went and took a look at that thread, was there a problem? Was there a technical reason why you couldn't post and leave, or just didn't want to? But I'm most concerned that there wasn't somebody out there trying to post and were unable to do so. We had quite a few people who registered, because you did have to register on the site to post, but we had lots of people register and nothing. So if you had any problems, please email me feedback@fusionpatrol.com and let me know, because I don't want to we'll do the contest again if that's the problem. But, we had every intention, and we tried ourselves and set up fake account and tested it, and it seemed to work. So if it didn't, then I would desperately like you to let me know.
Right.
Because the intent here was to give you guys a chance to win this. And I think that's all. Do we have anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Then Doomwatch, we do recommend it. It's not available on DVD to my knowledge. It was released on BBC videotape sometime ago. That's where we have our copies from.
I wondered where you got it.
Yep. It was released on BBC Video about probably in the mid 80s, I'd guess. But it's probably out there on YouTube. If I can find it, I'll post a link. And so until next week, I hope you'll join us again. And I'm Eugene, signing off.
And I'm Ben, signing off.
Cheers. You've been listening to the Fusion Patrol Podcast, a production of Lone Locust Productions. Join us on our new discussion forums at fusionpatrol.com. Find us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, username Fusion Patrol. You can also send us feedback by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. If you'd like to support Fusion Patrol, please leave us a review on iTunes. Fusion Patrol's theme music is Fight the Future by Amberwolf. I got to say it. I
got nothing.
The expression on your face is priceless.
You rat bastard.
I stole his line. That'll be what goes in after the credits,